You're listening to The Silver Stoner Show.
Hey, dudes and dudettes, it's me again, Uncle Herb, and this is my interview with Tom Dean, attorney at law. Now, Tom is a local Phoenix attorney in practice here, so those of you watching in Phoenix, I will provide the link below how to contact Tom, because those of us who are stoners have, some of us in the past, at least when it wasn't legal, gotten into serious trouble, and now at an arbitrary amount, you can still get in serious trouble. I saw a case just earlier today. I was reading I check the news every morning when I set up Silver Stoner News. They just locked up a kid for life for a couple of pounds of marijuana in, I want to say it was, what crazy ass state was it? I forget. But it was the kid's third strike and it was over marijuana. I mean, but why should that even be a strike when clearly pot is going to be legalized nationally? Okay, that we all agree on this. This is something we don't have to argue. But now I've got somebody who litigates, and we can talk about these issues. Tom, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. Listen, you're my hero. Okay.
Okay.
So as everybody knows, I've been down before. So I have a very different perspective. Mm-hmm. And I knew a lot of kids in prison, just kids, who were there locked up for just an arbitrary amount of pot. Now that it's inevitable, because 70% of the American people want it, that sooner or later we're going to get national legalization. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, how many states now? 18, 19 states are recreational, 30-something?
Yeah. So really close to kind of that critical mass of states, I think, before Congress really has no choice but to act or else look disconnected.
Well,
entirely.
If you have 30-plus states legalized on medical, you already have the number necessary to make a constitutional amendment.
Well,
you've got two-thirds of the states.
That's right. You could do. There's different ways to look at it. I mean, it could be solved in the legislature, which is more than likely how it's going to be solved in Congress when they legalize on a federal level. Might start out with banking normalization and tax reform, so that businesses in the industry, for example, can because that tends to be what apparently drives most of the changes. Seems to be industry money, and Congress likes money too, and the only way for them to get it is if they can tax these billions of dollars. What was it, $20 billion? I think.
It was $21 billion. It was not, but fucking close enough, right? Yeah.
And but they can't capture that when it's a cash-based business, because no one's reporting all the cash that they get, and besides that, they're not allowed to take business deductions on their taxes. So first, you got to let the industry bank, and then you got to let them do regular business deductions like any. That's what's good. That's, I think.
Wait. Stop there. I just learned something new. Okay, they're not allowed to take deductions. So let me make. And again, this is new to me. I knew all about the other part of it. Okay, the banking issues. I've been talking about it on, as you guys know, on Silver Stoner for since the beginning. But so if I open a dispensary, okay, and I'm selling weed in one form or another,
right.
And I'm paying the rent on my space, and I'm paying my employees, and I'm paying for their health insurance, and I'm paying for all the things. Yeah. I'm matching their FICA. I'm running their pay through a payroll service. I'm moving cash out of my bank account that I process so that I can do that through.
If you have one.
If you once
If you have a bank account, I mean, most banks don't allow it, but there are some. Yeah.
What a fucking mess. So
they can't do a standard deduction. They can't do a business deduction.
Well, if you can't deduct, why would you report?
Well, exactly. So the first thing they've got to do is they've got to do tax reform and banking reform if they want their money. Congress wants the money. $20 billion laying around out there.
Wait. We're legal in Arizona, right? We're recreationally legal. And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure. In Arizona, on state taxes, let me ask you, since they are legal here recreationally, can they deduct their expenses, at least on the state taxes?
Well, except that, I'm not a tax attorney, but it's really the state tax that's due is determined by what the federal tax was, right? So,
well, not really, but you can deduct the state tax from the federal tax.
Yeah, but I mean, all right, and so the problem is that under Section 280E of the Revenue Code, Federal Internal Revenue Code, you have to pay taxes on the sale of illegal drugs. That's required. If you don't, that's tax evasion. That's how they got Capone during Prohibition, right?
Right.
So you still have to pay it, but you're not allowed to do any deductions. So unlike a normal business, you deduct payroll, as you were saying, rent, utilities, equipment costs, any of that.
All your employer-related expenses, their health insurance. Why would you provide health insurance if you couldn't deduct it?
And so why would you report all your income? It is the way a lot of these companies think, well, then I just won't report.
Well, does that mean that
And
the
besides
legal
its
pot industry is
cash-
maybe twice as big as we think it is?
Yes, and besides it's cash-based, most of these don't have bank accounts because most banks won't allow banking because if they do, they can be charged with an accomplice to money laundering. And there's very strict FinCEN regulations. That's a federal Treasury Department's regulatory body over banks. It's against FinCEN regulations for banks to have accounts in the cannabis industry, except for under very specifically outlined circumstances in recent years. And that means constant suspicious activity reporting that the bank has to do to say whether or not they've noticed anything about this account that causes them to think that it might not be in compliance with state law, or whether they've noticed something that is concerning to them. So it's a lot of red tape for a bank. Most banks won't do it. Some banks, very few, I think there's maybe 300 nationwide that will actually have an account because they're smaller and it's enough of a profit center for them that they're willing to go through the red tape.
So when I go to, for example, Curaleaf, I'm going to use them as an example, guys, only because they're the largest chain of dispensaries in the United States and the largest publicly traded cannabis stock currently. Okay, so we are not sponsored by any dispensary, and I want to make that very, very clear. But I have shopped at Curaleaf many times on Camelback, just down the street at 10th, and I can run a debit card. Okay.
Yep.
What bank am I processing?
Well, it's unclear. That might be a bank that's not even in the United States. It might be a debit card that is connected to one of these banks because, like I said, there are a few hundred now nationwide. I believe there's at least 2 now in Arizona.
So where are they carding their cash at night? To one of these banks?
If they have an account with one of these banks, yes. But that it's possible that if they weren't running their account correctly at one of those banks, they can no longer bank there. If you've got suspicious activity, they'll cancel the account, and then you're shit out of luck. At that point, you're burying cash in your backyard or putting it in a safe. You're having someone run it. I mean, there's people who actually have special licenses with the Federal Reserve that allows them to show up with cash and deposit it directly into the Federal Reserve. That's a service I know that's in California and other states. I don't think it's here yet in Arizona, but that they'll literally pick up your cash, take it to the Federal Reserve, and that's legal apparently through their license. So there's different techniques that are used to try, but mostly it's cash based. And obviously, a lot of that cash doesn't find its way into the tax return.
Well, why would it? You know,
right.
I got to be honest with you. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was a Russian Jewish immigrant that came at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century. And I always thought he literally told me I was a schmuck when I started going into businesses that were regulated, because why would you do it if you couldn't take the cash? It makes no sense to me. Okay, yeah. But understand, he started as a fruit hustler and ended up being the largest potato shipper on the East Coast. But to make a long, that's the old immigrant Horatio Alger story. You know, he did great.
Yeah.
God rest his soul. But the point is, they got to be knowing. I mean, the government has to know that there's enormous amount. I mean, why wouldn't
absolutely.
you?
That's why this banking and tax reform is at the forefront at the federal level, kind of ahead of outright legalization. And obviously there's good actors and bad actors in the industry in the sense that there are plenty of examples of licenses that do it the right way, report all the income, even though they don't get to do deductions. But then there's obviously others that don't. And so whatever percentage that other is of the industry, say it's just 20%. I mean, how many billions of dollars does that represent that might the IRS might otherwise be able to capture?
And it's funny. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning that they're getting very serious about capturing crypto. And I know that a lot of guys, I happen to know this firsthand because I know, and again, I'm not going to use names, obviously, but are using obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum and transferring enormous amounts of money that way. And the government, agree with me or disagree, I'm going to make a blanket statement. They're not nearly as slick as they think they are, or as they advertise. Okay, so the IRS is dramatically undermanned to do what it is that they claim that they want to do. So the chances of you getting caught, even though they run these articles and they publish what is essentially propaganda, you're really not going to get caught. I mean, unless you're stupid.
Opinion.
Well, that's my opinion. My opinion, unless you want to use Tom and retain him for 25 G's or 50 or whatever he asked for. I don't care. It's none of my business.
I don't mess around with tax law.
Okay, yeah. Right. So, but let's bring this down to earth, because most of the people watching us now are not big business people. and they're not dealing with
Well,
millions
yeah,
of
that's
dollars
what I was
cash flow.
going to say. I mean, the thing is here is it's the two sides to this to reform. It's always the money side. Governments are interested in revenue. People in the industry are interested in consolidating, making more money. That obviously drives a lot of reform because that's where the money's coming from, the industry usually, to get initiatives passed and that kind of thing. But that's never been a reason I ever wanted to legalize. I mean, as Keith Stroup, the founder of NORML, used to be my boss when I was there in Washington, D.C., said, he's like, look, we ain't got any problems with with pot dealers. I mean, without them, we're going to get our shit. But at the same time, that's not our mission, is to figure out how they can make money. Our mission is to represent the consumer interest. And that's really what, in the minds of voters, drives the desire to reform. I mean, sure, they throw in as icing on the cake, hey, look, we're going to make tax revenue and we'll give it to the schools or whatever, and that makes it a little appealing. But nobody's voting yes to legalize marijuana because they want to generate more tax money or they want a handful of people to become very wealthy. They're voting yes because they understand that these laws are draconian and it's time to stop destroying lives over a relatively harmless plant. That's why people vote yes. And so it seems like so often we just, you look at articles in the paper, so many of them deal with the industry. Oh, look, this acquisition or this harvest just sells for $2.1 million, and that's what seems to dominate so much of the news, when that's not really what the hell people care about. What they're talking about is they want to see an end to these overzealous law enforcement prosecutors who are persecuting people who they know, especially now that we've had medical marijuana in Arizona for 10 years. You can't argue reefer madness tactics anymore because everybody knows somebody who's a medical marijuana patient, and and they didn't jump out of a window or steal a TV to go buy some weed or anything, or become a heroin or a cocaine addict or something like that.
Yeah, that gateway drug bullshit argument.
All those reefer madness arguments. Now everybody in Arizona goes, yeah, there was nothing to it. We've been lied to for decades. So they want to see an end to the persecution, and that's really what drives reform on the grassroots, on the voter. When you pass an initiative, that's why people are voting yes, legalize marijuana. Not because of these money things, but that seems to be what drives so much of the media news cycle in this area.
So let's talk. It's hard not to know anybody who doesn't know somebody who's gotten a criminal charge over marijuana or some related drug charge over the years. Right. And when I was down, I was in two different prisons. Okay, I was in the Yuma. I was in Yuma in La Paz, which is a minimum security yard. I mean, I wasn't in there with the murderers because I was a white collar crook, but there I was. But I was in with 1,800 guys. So I got to know a lot of drug people. I mean, a lot. Right. The cartels tried to recruit me to do money laundering for them when I got out. But, I was a one and done. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I'll never wear orange again. But, as I'm sure you know, because you know a lot of these guys too, I'm sure through defending them, they're really not what they depict in movies. These are real people with three-dimensional lives, with families and things. And the reason that they kill people, frankly, guys, I've said it before, I'll say it again. And when you make an enterprise illegal, you take away the courts. In other words, if you have an associate who steals from you, and you're in a legal business, you have an employee that skims, you can call the police or you can, take them to court or whatever the case might be. But when you're in a legal enterprise, your only recourse is violence. Mm-hmm. It's the law itself. It's not that these guys want to kill everybody inside. It's that what would you do? What would you do?
Well, yeah, so much comes from that. I mean, you've got the need to utilize violence to enforce agreements, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And we hear all this about, I happen to be someone who supports the Second Amendment. There's a lot of controversy, obviously, about gun violence. So much of that, though, happens in the inner cities. Why? Oftentimes because it's over gang disputes relating directly to drug trade. And so it's like, you want to make drugs illegal and then say, oh, look, they're using guns because they can't come to court. Now we're going to take your guns away. And it's this slippery slope.
It's bullshit. You want Black Lives to Matter, take away the illegal enterprise.
Yeah, take away the illegal. Instead of taking my Fourth Amendment rights away and eroding those away, as has happened over
Explain everyone knows Second Amendment, everyone knows First Amendment, but then when you get into the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and down, no one knows them. So explain Fourth Amendment, please.
Yeah, so the Fourth Amendment is what protects everyone against unreasonable stops, detentions, searches, seizures. And over the decades, during the war on drugs, which is primarily directed at cannabis consumers and cannabis dealers, has caused courts in desperation, because we are so obsessed with this idea of drugs are our greatest problem, even though until the 30s we had all these drugs in the United States since the founding fathers, since the beginning.
Oh my God, Wyatt Earp was smoking opium.
Since
I mean,
before.
there's
well, that's right. Wild Bill Hickok had glaucoma. He smoked opium for that, but all of a sudden, and according to most people, those were when America was great, right? Well, all the drugs were legal. So now you take drugs away, or you say drugs are illegal now, and you're going to go to prison, and somehow everyone fell under the spell of this war on drugs, this huge criminal industrial.
That was Richard Nixon who coined that.
Coined the phrase. I mean, it started before, obviously, but and then this gigantic prison industrial complex grew up around the war on drugs.
I'm stealing that prison industrial complex. I love that.
And where most people in prison, federal prison, are there for nonviolent drug offenses, and you've got the Fourth Amendment. That had to be the problem they were having. Was, God, this Fourth Amendment, this keeps getting in our way, because we can't just kick doors in and get away with it, because apparently that's a Fourth Amendment violation, and now we can't use the evidence. And so the courts continued to erode over the decades, till what we have left with the Fourth Amendment is nothing as robust as it was, say, 50 years ago. And that the same goes for the Second Amendment we were just talking about. Now they want to
Before you move on, I just saw an interesting article on Fourth Amendment today, that police departments around the country have been training their drug dogs to have 100% positive every time they stop anybody with the canine unit. In other words, the dog didn't smell, but the courts regard the drug dogs as infallible, so they're using this for search and seizure.
Well, when you ask these guys, because I've had these cases involving drug dogs, and you ask the handler, how many times has he had a false positive, and they'll say never. And then you continue to probe them. Was the dog ever alerted and you didn't find any drugs? Well, yeah. I go, but I just asked you whether he ever had a false positive. Oh, well, no, that means there were drugs there very recently. They had just been removed, and the dog could still
Tom,
detect it. So there is no
every
such
$20
thing.
bill in America is infiltrated with cocaine. Right. I mean, I hate to tell you, but that's true. That's not a joke. Yeah. All right. I mean, you get a drug positive anytime
that a drug dog will alert to. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting about drug dogs, because they're trained to alert to a panel of different substances. Opioids, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana. They've had to get rid of an entire slew of drug dogs, because once marijuana became legal, those dogs are worthless now.
Well, I'll take them. They
make
great pets.
Because if they alert, they can't tell you whether they're alerting to cocaine or marijuana. They just do it the same way, So it might be marijuana. Can you tell me it wasn't? So they have to replace all the drug dogs now. After November now, have had to been replaced.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Adopt the drug dog, but if you smoke pot around him, you're going to drive him fucking crazy. But anyway, it's like adopting greyhounds. One of the things.
It's like deprogramming. You have to deprogram.
Out here, because we have dog tracks in Arizona, there's a big movement of people, because I'm a dog guy, to adopt the greyhounds, because they were destroying them when they couldn't win races. Right, the owners would destroy them, and they make great pets. Every greyhound is trained. 100 people can pick them up, so they're the world's most passive, gentle dogs. Drug dogs would be If I adopted a Malinois or a German Shepherd that was a drug dog, fuck, he'd go crazy in my house. I'm smoking pot every day.
Well, yeah, you'd have to. What the problem is wherever you kept the weed, he'd sit there all day scratching the door, because I'm alerting. Someone give me a bone.
I love that. But let's go. Okay, so I also, when I was in state prison, you said in federal prison it's mostly nonviolent drug offenses. In state prison, the statistic is only about a third. They always say this. Only a third of inmates in state prison are there for drug offenses. Bullshit. Yeah. It's 100%. Yeah. The violent offenses are all connected to and the robberies.
Right.
Okay, so they put those people down there. It would all go away.
If they find a firearm at a house that they searched and found drugs, and the person also is charged with misconduct involving a weapon, right, for having a firearm in the vicinity of a drug offense, then they're not going to count that as that person's in prison for a drug offense. Because there's also a weapons misconduct offense. So yeah,
I knew a guy in prison. Okay, I only know his prison handle, and I'm not going to use it because I don't have his permission. This is a 55-year-old guy that is missing all of his teeth. Has been an addict his whole life. It was not just functionally illiterate, absolutely illiterate. Couldn't write his own name, but was one of the nicest guys you ever met. Fell asleep in a bad bender on the porch of a house where they did a drug bust, found weapons, went down for the weapons, they weren't even his weapons.
Wow. Yeah.
Of course, he had a public defender, and some are good and some are awful. And
So yeah, I don't know the facts of that case. Maybe he had a felony conviction. He was a
oh no,
prohibited,
he was a.
So he's a prohibited possessor, and they go, oh look, we found guns that we think that you could have access to. Therefore, you have now committed weapons misconduct because as a felon, you're not allowed to be around firearms. He didn't even know they're there. Probably he's passed out in the front.
No, he was
somewhere.
no he.
Yeah,
he had to know him to
that's
understand.
really crooked for them to do that. Yeah.
You know, even the guys that were guilty. And this brings me to the two issues that I want to discuss with you. The first is, and I'll not get, my mind goes everywhere as we're having this, and I'm thinking of different things. Even if you had a 1-year drug charge, it's a life sentence because you're a felon forever. Are they going to expunge this shit?
Well,
I mean, what's going
it's
on?
Interesting. I have a client who's a veteran right now. I have a lot of veteran clients, but he showed me the latest policy statement from the VA. So if you make 20% or more, if you're a 20% or more service-connected disabled veteran, okay, so that means service-connected, meaning your disability arises directly out of your service. If you have 20% or more, so 20, 30, 50, 90%, 100% service-connected disability, if you get a drug felon, then that automatically drops down to you're just a 10%. So if you're 100% service-connected, you're totally disabled, that felony happens, you now only get 10% of the benefits.
It's absolutely factual. My prison job at Kingman, that was the second yard I was at, is I was the VA representative for the inmates because I'm a veteran, and I was the only one who could read and write. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they made me the VA to help the veterans transition out. And I'm not exaggerating. 2,000 guys. I was the only veteran literate to help them with forms, right? So, and to get, their health insurance, things that most inmates get thrown on the street. At least the veterans get something, right?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. They were just killing them on the service-related disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a shame because especially when it's marijuana-related, because again, like you're saying, there's a lot of collateral consequences beyond you have a felony.
Even the Vicodin, a lot of these guys are self-medicating because they can't.
Yeah, right.
Healthcare it depends where you are. It can be very good or very bad. Mm-hmm. A lot of these guys, even though they're eligible for VA benefits, don't know it because they're illiterate and they're ignorant of it. They're not stupid, but they're ignorant of it. Or they have mental issues on top of it.
There's the mental things too, PTSD, that kind of thing that is a problem, and it gets in the way of them accessing those kinds of services or benefits. So,
in this legal state, is anyone still prosecuting marijuana laws?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So tell me what you're seeing in real practice. The benefit is so that people understand that it's legal, but it's not that legal. So,
well, we're obviously not seeing people getting busted for possessing within an ounce of marijuana. That's been legalized, or of which 5 grams can be in the form of concentrates. Concentrates in Arizona is considered a narcotic drug. So people aren't possession of paraphernalia relating to marijuana. We're not seeing people get charged with any of those crimes because they would be immediately dismissed. But we're still seeing prosecutions for DUI of people who are accused of being impaired by marijuana while driving.
So how do they know that? So I smoked, and I was thinking about this. I smoked pot this morning, and then I left a couple of hours go by so I wouldn't be driving under the influence.
Right.
I know how long it lasts for me. Okay, so, but it's clearly in my system, right?
Yeah.
How do they know if I'm high or not? I mean,
they don't.
It's not a breathalyzer. How do they do it?
National Highway Traffic. Well, to find out whether there's THC in your system, first of all, I'll give you a quick. DUI is interesting in Arizona with marijuana. For decades, it was just any metabolites in your system, active or inactive. Active THC is called hydroxy THC. Inactive is called carboxy THC. Didn't matter which. Carboxy can be detected in your system through urine for over a month. So I remember in the 90s representing people who would be like, well, 3 weeks ago I was at a work party on Friday and we smoked a little weed. But no, there was no defense to that. Unless you could prove somehow that they botched the test, which is very difficult to do, then they would be guilty of DUI, even though definitively everyone agrees, oh yeah, he wasn't impaired, even in the slightest, but he had this inactive THC. It must have been from several weeks ago, but oh well.
Excuse me, so at the traffic stop, I want to understand the mechanics of this. What does the cop do to get that? Does he draw blood? What does he do?
Well, so again, going back into the decades on the inactive metabolite, God knows how many people were convicted of DUI because they had smoked weed several weeks previous. That changed a few years ago to where the Supreme Court finally said, well, that's absurd. The metabolites at least have to be active, the hydroxy-THC. Well, the hydroxy can still be detected for several days. So that didn't really do much to help, for example, patients or people who are regular cannabis consumers. John Tatz, Dave Eichner, and I brought a case up called State v. Dobson to the Supreme Court then a couple years later saying on behalf of patients. And we're able to get the Supreme Court to agree that for patients, if they can convince the jury that the level of THC in their system was not sufficient to cause them to be impaired, then that was a defense. So it wasn't the automatic per se. They had an opportunity to demonstrate to the jury, and if the jury agreed, yeah, you know what, we don't think that caused you to be impaired, not guilty. But then 207 now has really solved the whole problem, and this is something I fought for really hard in 207. I got a lot of pushback from the ADA.
207, whenever we use terms like that, please define.
Prop 207 is a Smart and Safe Arizona Act. That's what passed in Arizona in November that legalized adult use of marijuana.
Is that true? The most states around the country have all the legal states have done similar things.
Yeah, now some have done it by legislation. For example, New York recently didn't do it by ballot initiative. They did it by the legislature actually did it. So it depends, but in most cases it's a ballot initiative that brings it about. So then, but in 207, the new adult use law here in Arizona, as I said, there was pushback because apparently the ADA, the Arizona Dispensary Association, who sponsored primarily the initiative, the Smart and Safe Arizona Act, had done polling that indicated that if they even mentioned DUI in any way, that they lose 1.8 points on the vote, which to them was very concerning because in 2016, the margin, when we last had adult use and failed, the margin was very close. So they felt that I said, look, if you don't legalize DUI, then if you don't do something to reform DUI, you haven't legalized marijuana because quite frankly, at this point, it's worse, it's harsher, the punishment is more severe to have a first offense DUI than to have a first offense possession of marijuana case in Arizona. So fortunately, they agreed finally to include that. And what it says is they didn't do away with it, but they said the state has the obligation now to prove that whatever the THC level, which is measured in nanograms per milliliter, whatever that THC level is, it caused that driver to be impaired. They have to prove that to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's a real game changer. It's going to be
very difficult to prove.
Much more difficult now for the state to sustain a conviction under that burden. And the National Highway Traffic Safety, especially when the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, consistently since their first study in 1993 and their most recent meta-study in 2017, has said it is impossible to draw a correlation between THC nanogram level and impairment. You look at, for example, Marinol, right? That's a prescription THC product. Doctors can actually prescribe it. The warning label says, do not drive or operate heavy equipment until you become accustomed to the effects of this substance, or words to that effect. Admitting that you can be under the influence of THC and be fine to drive. All of the studies, as you said, 2 hours, you were right on, because all of the studies indicate that the effects of THC on what scientists will refer to as euphoric effects, or what we might think of as possibly impairing effects, last for 2 hours. Some studies as long as 2.5 hours. Most studies 2 hours. And so, without going off on too much of a tangent on DUI, it's going to be very difficult, in my opinion, for the state to sustain convictions, except in the most egregious cases where they've got, really erratic driving or just floundering field sobriety tests or something like that to really underscore it. And I mean, I could go on and on about DUI.
So are they still even trying to bring those cases?
Well,
or have the prosecutors wised up because it's a loser?
Definitely seeing a decrease in that. I think they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. I have one case now that happened after the new law. And I filed a notice of appearance in the case, but before our first hearing, they sent me a motion to dismiss. They threw in the towel without even going to the first hearing. So I think they're trying to figure out how the hell they're supposed to even prosecute these cases.
So the magic level is an ounce, right?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, that's so arbitrary. why is 2 ounces a felony and 1 ounce not? What is the there's got to be reasoning behind this. What is the reasoning?
Well, there is no reasoning. I mean, it's just an arbitrary number, as you suggested. I mean, the other arbitrary number is 2.5 ounces, which was the allowable amount under the Medical Marijuana Act, and actually is the buffer zone amount, what I call the buffer, because if you possess more than an ounce, as long as it's not more than 2.5 ounces, it's just a petty offense. Maximum $300 fine, no jail time possible. So if you go over 1 ounce, but up to 2.5 ounces, but again, well, why the 2.5 ounces?
Yeah,
Where's that number come from?
And why I'm a medical patient, just because I prefer paying 24% less for my pot, and anybody can get a medical card, right? So, I mean, I think for me as a veteran, because I'm an Alta Cucker, I think it was $150, but I think it's what, $300 if you're not, or what?
It's $150 to get the card.
I think so. I think
It's $150 to get a 2-year card.
2-year card. That's it. Yeah, I paid $150
Yeah.
because I don't want to fuck with it every year. I mean, who would want to do that?
Well, yeah, that's a funny story actually. The legislature, Sheila Polk from Yavapai County, came down to passionately argue against. What they wanted to do is reduce the price. They wanted to cut the card price by half. They wanted to charge $75 a year because back then it was a 1-year renewal. They said, well, let's charge $75. She came down, raised all kinds of hell about all you're going to do is cause more drug addicts, and this is just going to encourage more people to get a medical marijuana card. It's like, well, wait a minute. So what's wrong with that? It's a medical marijuana card. You're making it easier for people to have debilitating medical conditions to obtain their card. What's wrong with that? But anyhow, she prevailed. It didn't make it. But then right after that, a new bill was introduced to say, well, okay, we'll keep it at $150, but we'll make it last for 2 years, which is effectively like the same thing.
$75 a year for 2 years, right?
And that sailed right through. Well, I don't know if it sailed through, but it got through.
You know, intelligence is not a prerequisite for office, right?
Right.
And in this state, and guys, you know, everyone watching us, you're from everywhere, Canada to Mexico, around the world, but Arizona is an interesting dichotomy state. On one hand, you have the new people coming in from California who are bringing a more progressive set of ideas as they come in. And on the other hand, you have the old guard, you know, and I don't want to even throw Barry Goldwater into this, because he was actually pro-legalization. He was a libertarian.
Yeah, I was actually just at the...
Goldwater's my hero.
I was just at the Goldwater Gallery a week ago today for an artist friend of mine who had a exhibit, a show there, and to raise some money. And it's at one of his old houses. It's all set up. You know, normally they've got a lot of his. He's a photographer. You know.
Oh, he loved it. Yeah.
And I was hanging out there with a couple.
And a pilot too, by the way. And I'm a pilot. I love the guy.
And so I was hanging out there with a couple of his grandchildren who are very far afield from his politics, I think, but who love him very much and you know trying to preserve his legacy and that kind of thing. Beautiful little place, wonderful people. It's and you know you can, of course, they're his grandkids, so they definitely resemble, you know. So it was interesting.
What interesting story on him. What happened? You know, he was depicted, because I'm old enough to remember this in '64. I'm actually old enough to remember this as basically going to start a nuclear war, and you know, and he famously said extremism in the pursuit of liberty is not a vice, and you know, and so on and so forth. And people took that, and LBJ painted him but it turned out he was right about everything, basically. In Vietnam, he said either let's win it or lose it. But you know, there'd be 50,000 living Americans and their descendants today if Barry Goldwater had been elected president, because he'd have withdrawn. He did. But later on, the reason he changed his mind, and in today's culture, he wouldn't be allowed to because of woke culture would hold against him what he said. Because in the old days, he was a John Bircher. But as he got older and older, if you want to know what a John Bircher is, look it up. But
he evolved.
And he had a grandchild, coming to your point, who's gay.
That's right.
And it completely changed his point of view.
Yeah, and I was that's one of the guys I was hanging out with at this art show. He happened to be there. Wonderful guy, you know, really interesting guy to talk to. But yeah, I guess he was part of what influenced him.
And that also points to, this is nothing to do with what we're talking about, but holding things against people from 40 years ago when they've changed their point of view sincerely. Come on, you know, like loosen up. You know, this destruction of what you did is because at 17 you were a schmuck. You know, come on.
I know, it's unfortunate. The cancel culture is really. I mean, I think it's. Look, I think
if more people smoked weed, they would be canceling less.
I got to believe, or at least hope, that it's going to run its course, because this idea of you know, going back years and years and years and sifting through everything and finding one maybe off comment that someone made. That at the time might have been perfectly like acceptable in the form of comedy or whatever, and now because of that 20 years ago, you're canceled.
It
even
goes
though
on
even
and
though
on.
you apologize, which is obviously.
But translating that to our marijuana laws, it's no different than you have an offense when you were 20 years old for pot, and now for the rest of your life you're a felon on every job application.
Right.
When are they going to expunge those records?
Well, so that begins on July 12th. Beginning July 12th, there are 4 types of marijuana convictions that can be expunged. Possession of marijuana up to 2.5 ounces. Possession of concentrates, which in Arizona are referred to as the narcotic drug cannabis, up to 12.5 grams. Paraphernalia associated with any of that. And cultivation of up to 6 plants. I've never represented anyone who cultivated 6 plants or less, so I have a feeling there'll be like nobody will file for that expungement. but yeah, you never know. But yeah, so it's interesting though, because if you look at the Department of Public Safety started reporting these statistics in 2006, arrest statistics, and online. You can go online and look at them, and they break it down, like for example, possession of marijuana. It's reported from 2006 to 2006 to 2019. So we have 14 years. The latest report is 2019. 2020 should be coming out sometime soon. 187,000 some individuals arrested for possession of marijuana in those 14 years. So whatever, 15 to 18,000 people a year.
Where? In what location?
In Arizona.
187,000 in Arizona?
Yeah, in Arizona, arrested. Now, first of all, most people agree that probably a lot of local agencies who are responsible for reporting this data to the Department of Public Safety underreport or don't comply. Secondly, and I was talking to a friend of mine at the ACLU, runs a criminal department there, and I said, tell me this. Most people that or at least half or more who are charged with marijuana offenses are never arrested. They're cited and released. You know, they get, if it's just like a little personal amount, they get a citation and a court date, and they're allowed to go on their way. These are only arrests. So what about those people? Are they included in this? He goes, that's a really good question. I don't know. But if they're not arrested, I don't think they would be. So we may even have double that or more in the last 14 years of representing also people who weren't arrested. And that's just for possession of marijuana. That's not possession of drug paraphernalia. That's not possession of concentrates. That's not cultivation of 6 plants or less. Add that on top of it. And that's only for 14 years.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so
then multiply that times 50 states.
Right.
I mean, some states are bigger and some states are larger, but still.
And we're a lower population state, but think about that in terms.
I'd hate to see what California statistics are.
Well, and here's the thing is the 207, the Adult Use Act that passed here in Arizona in November, allocated $4 million in grant money to organizations, nonprofit organizations, who can provide expungement services for people that are eligible. And you think, when you saw it, and you're like, $4 million, wow, that's a bunch of money. That'd be nice to get some of that. Until you do something like divide that, just the last 14 years, just talking about possession of marijuana, 187,000 people, divide that into $4 million, and all of a sudden that's $21 a petition. You know, how the hell is anyone supposed to process a whole petition for just $21? That doesn't even pay your gas and the cost of the printing, practically.
No, it wouldn't.
So it's a joke. The $4 million is a total joke. It can't even put a scratch on the overall number of people who are eligible for expungement. So 99% of those who are, so let me put it another way before I say that. If you say, okay, an attorney can maybe at basically at cost, let's say, process, because you got to do the research, you got to get the supporting documentation before you file the petition, and then you might have to go to a hearing if the state objects to it and have a contested hearing, etc. Let's say you can do all that for $500. That's pretty freaking cheap, right? $500 to handle a case like that. Let's say that's what you're willing to do it for. Well, that only ends up being like 5,000 cases in $4 million, over $4 million or something like that. I forget the exact number, but a very few compared to the number of people that are eligible. So what does that mean? That $4 million is going to get shot, like gone the next day. It's hardly going to make a scratch. Everybody else, unless there's new funding for it from the legislature, or something, they're going to have to pay
an
attorney to file.
May I ask an ignorant, stupid question?
Yeah.
And this is going to be an ignorant, stupid question. I'm really sorry I'm asking it, but it just popped in my head. Why doesn't the fucking governor just pardon them all and call it square? I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
seriously, can't the governor that's got his head on half straight
Well,
just declare a blanket pardon?
That's what the governor did in Illinois just a few months ago. 500,000 people were expunged, like that.
Seems like
They
seems like
did the work.
an elegant way of doing
They
it.
did the work. They found the people because they're the ones who have access to the database.
They're the ones who arrested him and locked him up in the first place. They got to know.
Yeah, so they have all the information and they did it. No one's doing that here. Don't expect any of these prosecutors or our governor.
Is Illinois the only state where they have a governors with the brain?
I believe that's happened at least maybe on a more local level in other states. But what the governor did in Illinois was pretty impressive. And now we do have some. You have Alistair Adele in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. She's said that she will at least. She's not going to go and do the work for you, but if you submit like an application to her office, they will, in their time, investigate it, and if they agree that the person's eligible, that they'll file on that person's behalf. Now, they've said that. They haven't done it, obviously, yet, because you can't do it till July 12th. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But my way of thinking is, well, the reason you would do that probably is more because if they filed it themselves, you'd only have 30 days to research it and respond. And if you don't, it's going to be granted. And, so they want to research, did it involve more than 2.5 ounces? Was it more than 6 plants? So how are they going to do that in 30 days? So I think partly it's like, no, we'll do it for you. Just give it to, that way they can sit on it, take their time, and not be pressed in a month on an avalanche of expungement petitions coming in. So I think partly it's to slow that down.
People bitch and moan about how much the government spends, right?
Yeah.
And all they do is make requirements to do paperwork that cause more expenses. I mean, there's no reason for any of this shit. I'm sorry. I'm very libertarian about this sort of thing. And that brings me to another subject, which is we're not really legal. We're kind of half-ass legal.
Yeah.
And we're still creating I personally know lots of people still buying their pot under the table.
Yeah.
Because it's so much less expensive and so much less hassle.
And oftentimes a lot better quality.
That's better quality too. But I'm not buying it under the table. I am I don't want to.
No, that's true. So here's what happens. They legalize every adult 21 years or older is allowed to possess and consume marijuana. First of all, the industry has a scarcity issue because they don't have enough. They're geared to serving 250,000 medical marijuana patients. It's going to take a couple of years for them to even catch up to the demand. But they have to pay a 16% excise. They have to pay regular sales tax, then a 16% excise tax on top of that. And then they've got all of these regulatory compliance costs and so forth. Very expensive for them to produce the marijuana. This guy over here who's grown it in his basement or whatever, his costs he's not paying taxes. His costs are minimal. He's going to be able to sell better quality, in many cases, marijuana for dramatically less than than going and buying it from the dispensary. And so you've got the number of people, everyone over 21 or over is legal to use it. The black market in the state of Arizona is only going to become much larger now.
As I was driving to this studio today, I won't say where it is, but I drove by a fenced off derelict property with brand new air conditioning and heating units on the roof with boarded windows and said to myself, oh, they're growing. I mean, come on. It's obviously people are just figuring it out.
Yeah, but now under the new law, cops can't get search warrants based on probable cause that someone's growing marijuana. They have to find also additional information that they're breaking the law. Because it's illegal to grow for every adult 21 years or older to grow marijuana. So they got to figure out if they have a confidential informant that's telling them they have more plants than they're allowed to have.
Just a question. Yeah. So I used to live in Southern California for a brief time, and I walked by, there was a guy growing like a maniac, and I'd walk by his house, I could smell it. But smelling it doesn't tell you how many plants. Is that probable cause? So in other words, if an officer's walking by...
Not anymore. It used to be. Yeah, not since November. It's not, because now it specifically says in the new law that the odor of marijuana is not sufficient to establish probable cause or even reasonable suspicion, which is a lesser standard to to temporarily detain someone, for example, or pull someone over. The only exception to that is if it's a search of a vehicle in connection with the DUI investigation. So if a cop thinks he's developed probable cause that this person's impaired, then he can still search the car to find evidence that might support his, idea that this guy's under the influence of marijuana. That's it, though. As far as getting a search warrant for a home or searching a vehicle outside of, a a DUI situation. That's no longer lawful in Arizona. So that's obviously going to improve things a lot. And cops I'll tell you right now, I know who these guys are, these cops who do the marijuana interdictions, and here in Maricopa County especially. And they're in no way throwing in the towel and going, oh, well, I guess we lost. Maybe I can be a traffic cop now or something. No, they are right now recalibrating, figuring out how now they have to adjust their approach to be able to bust all these people, how they're going to do it now under the new rules. It's just a game for them.
They're a bureaucrat. All a cop is a bureaucrat with a gun, right? And no one goes into policing because they're noble. I mean, maybe there's one, like on TV with the noble guy, but come on, they're just bureaucrats with guns.
Yeah.
And I'm not anti-police.
Well, they're a little more, I would say, I wouldn't call them bureaucrats with guns because they're definitely, much more sort of passionate and excited about their job.
Yeah, ideological bureaucrats with guns, twice as dangerous.
So with the high fives and the woohoos and all that when they find marijuana and celebrating it and everything when some guy gets caught with a bag of weed or something like that, it's
these
bizarre.
guys need to be put out of business. Okay, so what I want to do now, because the interview is going along, and I'm going to have you back, Tom. There's just so much to talk about.
Yeah.
I hope you'll come back.
Sure.
But in fact, I'd like to have on fairly regularly as the laws evolve to bring people up to date. But today, let's bring it down to the practical. You're in a state like Arizona. I'm sure a lot of state laws are very similar. I'm sure there's not a tremendous amount of difference because legislators aren't that brilliant and they tend to copy one another. One thing works, another one does. You're arrested. Let's pretend you're a kid or a guy, anyone. You're arrested. What do you do? Give some practical advice. What you should say, what you should do, how you should handle it, and where you should go.
Well, I mean, I think that really starts before you get arrested. Before you get arrested, when you come into contact with law enforcement, say you're pulled over for a speeding ticket or something, and things start going a little sideways because the cop's like, I smell marijuana. Do you have any marijuana in the car? Well, that's not illegal to have marijuana in the car. But when he starts going in that direction, he might be trying to move towards a DUI type of a scenario. So you got to be careful. You can't provide false information to the officer. That's also a crime. It's a misdemeanor, false information to law enforcement. So if he ends up finding it, you'll probably get charged with that too. If not the marijuana, because let's say he searches, he finds. If you're within your amount of marijuana, look, and he says, I smell marijuana, do you got any? The problem is if you lie about it, now you're starting to develop his probable cause.
Right.
So my feeling is that you say, well, yeah, I do. I'm 21 or older, you saw my driver's license, and then that would be it. Because if he then says, oh, really, how much do you have? Then I think the answer is well within my allowable amount. I mean, he'll say, well, do you mind if I see it? And at that point, I think the right answer is to say, well, you got to decide. I mean, if you got nothing to hide, you could say, all right, yeah, sure, here it is. But if you're at all concerned that maybe you might not be within your allowable amount, then the right answer there is to say, well actually, no. I've attended a legal seminar about the new law, and I was told that I have no obligation to show you my marijuana. Well, you mind if I search the car? No. So you got, at that point, no. Now, if you have like something I created when I was legal director at NORML back in 1999, which is you can still get from NORML. It's called the NORML Freedom Card. I also have an updated version that's called the Glove Box Lawyer, which is a statement of your rights that you sign on the bottom. So when things start going in the wrong direction and you're concerned, I might have a problem here, you simply say to the officer, I have some additional information I'd like to provide you with if that's okay. And officers are always going to, they're curious by nature, right? They're not going to say, no, I don't want to see whatever that is. They're going to say, okay, what is it? You hand him that, it's signed, it asserts all of your rights, it's in writing, and you just hand that to him and say, this is the only thing I have to say to you right now. And then if he decides he wants to overstep, arrest you or search the car or whatever, then, and he doesn't have probable cause or reasonable suspicion, then you can assert it to a judge in a motion to suppress and get rid of any incriminating evidence that he might have discovered. So that's leading up to the arrest. So there's a lot you can do to be careful about the way you handle law enforcement contact prior to an arrest. It's very difficult because they're very intimidating and they're trained in techniques of intimidation and interrogation. It's very difficult to stand your ground to an officer. Without even, some people will do it, but then they'll become angry, and all of a sudden the cops are good at also provoking. And so now all of a sudden they've got a situation where it turns into you're acting bizarre and stuff, and these are other factors. You got to remain calm, always respectful, but you have to remain firm regardless, and they'll bring another cop. They'll call another cop. The other cop will come up, and he'll try, and there'll be a good cop, bad cop, all designed to try to get you to agree to surrender your constitutional rights, your rights. That's the whole point, and you have to stand firm and do it. This glove box lawyer that I put out is meant to help someone do that, because
is that available on your website, or is that only to clients?
Yeah, no, it's available on my website. It's available in a few places. A few websites have it. I know.
Well, just to make life easy, we're going to go ahead and post the website below in the description. You guys can go straight to Tom's website.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a crappy website right now. We're getting ready to relaunch a new one. So
we forgive you. But as long as they can get the information, who gives a shit, really? I mean,
if you just Google search glove box lawyer, you'll find it available on various sites. And it's probably the single most prolific thing I've ever done, because so many organizations have adopted that statement that I did. And there's even an app out there I happen to find. And I'm like, this is my freaking my thing. And I
should have trademarked it, brother.
I emailed them.
Should have trademarked that.
Well, I did it when I was at Normal.
Yeah,
so,
I know. I understand.
So I emailed them, and I'm like, hey, listen, I don't want anything for this, but do you mind giving me some credit? You're using my thing. And of course, I never heard back from him, and I'm like, well.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's 2020 hindsight. It was great. One day, I'm a master at digression. I got a story in my head right now, but I'm not going there because Tech Mastery will shoot me. But, okay, so now let's take it a step further. They've got the glove box lawyer, but they got the Gestapo.
Right. What are they arrested for?
So now the Gestapo's arrested them.
Yeah.
Okay, for
they're
something.
in handcuffs, and they're in the back of the patrol car.
What now?
Well, I mean, hopefully once you're arrested, they're supposed to read you your Miranda rights. They don't always do that. But if you haven't already stopped talking and refused to answer questions and so forth, for God's sakes, you got to stop doing it now, because now you're arrested. They're going to continue to probably try to. The only difference is if you say during a detention before an arrest, so you're pulled over, side of the road, whatever, but you're not yet arrested. If you say, look, you assert your right to have an attorney present and your right to remain silent, they can badger you about that. It's only until after you get arrested when you say, I want to talk to an attorney, that everything has to stop. It has to immediately stop. Because if they continue to do that, anything you say they cannot use against you. So once you're arrested and you say those magic words, I want my attorney, that everything has to stop. They can't go, come on, why? If you're not guilty, just talk to us, or whatever they can't even try that. The only time they can use any statement after that is if you voluntarily agree to answer questions, or you spontaneously make statements without being asked questions. That can be used. But what you do is you just tell them, because there's nothing you're going to say that's going to help you. That's why the words are anything you say can and will be used against you. They will find a way to use anything you say against you. So you have to realize, no matter how smart you think you are, or how well you know the law, or what great defense you think you have,
Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, because whatever comes out of your mouth is going to be turned around and used against you.
All those idiot TV shows where they show the cops where people are, you'd have to be out of your mind. Shut the fuck up. Right. I couldn't give you that information. I don't need a lawyer to tell them that, but no one ever knows. You're not that smart. I don't give a fuck how smart you are. You're not that smart.
Right. And just another thing, when we were talking about DUI earlier, for God's sakes, do not do field sobriety tests. They will pressure you. Just stand your ground, because that only helps them develop their probable cause. It's their subjective interpretation of what they think they're seeing that's going to end up in the report.
So let me see if I got this straight. If they give you if they don't know if it's pot or alcohol, they'll give you're going to pass a breathalyzer.
Yeah.
So all they've got left is the field sobriety test.
Yeah,
so
you say no. I'm not going to do them. Obviously, they can't force you to do them, so you don't do them.
And you got your glove box lawyer, and you guys better have probable cause.
Yeah, and then they arrest you, and then what's their case? That you were going 5 miles over the speed limit and you had bloodshot, watery eyes? and that's supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt that the THC that they end up finding in your system. First of all, the arrest was invalid. You get all the evidence thrown out, but let's say the evidence makes its way in, and the jury, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that caused you to be impaired based on what? You had bloodshot, watery eyes. I mean, there's a million reasons why you might have bloodshot, watery eyes. And you were going, typically it's like a speeding. I love it when I get a DUI client who's speeding because all the studies show that people drive slower when they're under the influence. So when they pull someone over for speeding, it's like, that's it. That's
you see
proof
the
right there.
The Wolf of Wall Street as he's trying to creep his Lamborghini down. He's on Quaaludes, and the next morning it's destroyed. And he was. It's one of my favorite. Have you seen? It's like one of my favorite movies ever. I'm sorry. I haven't actually driven a Lamborghini that slow on Quaaludes, but I have used them back in the day, and it was. I won't lie.
So and so speeding, you're like, wow, that's great. We've got a speeding. That means, by definition, my client could not have been under the influence of marijuana because he was exceeding the speed limit.
That's really true.
Yeah, it is.
You get real slow. It's,
right.
Not that I actually know why. Okay, this is just I've heard it.
Well, I'll tell you why. I can actually tell you why. The most scientists, the idea is that the endocannabinoid system, which all animal life has, it's one of the most ancient systems in animal life. All animals have it. Is it because our own body produces we have little cannabinoid factories in our body that produce our own cannabinoids. THC is a cannabinoid. And the endocannabinoid system has receptors throughout your body and brain that regulates all that. So when it detects, the idea is when it detects a surplus of cannabinoids in the system, it autonomically, in other words, you're not thinking, I want to drive slower. If anything, you catch yourself going, oh shit, I'm going 10 miles an hour. So it's an autonomic response moderated by the endocannabinoid system that says, okay, let's slow everything down here for a second because we might be, our reaction time might be a step behind here temporarily, so let's slow everything down. That's why the idea is why people will drive slower, put more distance between their car and the car in front of them, etc., when they are under the influence of marijuana, and drive better than someone would when they were
I've heard
sober.
that many times from many, many people. I've always had been a little skeptical.
No, it's true. It's true. I was just talking to one of the foremost experts in this area, Dr. David Behrman from California, who's devoted his career to THC and impairment. He's one of maybe two people in the country that are the absolute most knowledgeable and best in this area. And he was remind me, what the hell were we just talking about?
We were talking about impairment, THC, driving under the influence, driving better.
Right.
Under
Okay.
the influence.
So yeah, the driving better part. He's got all these studies that he talks about that have proven that. And for example, there's been comparisons of people who haven't smoked any marijuana and people who smoke 2 joints. Their performance on coordination tests and so forth are in many cases the ones who had smoked the marijuana do better than the ones who haven't. One of those studies was done by our own Andy Weil.
I know Andy Weil, actually. I've known him for years.
He did a study in Harvard when he was in medical school where he had these 2 wheels, and it's like it was like a moving target, and you had to constantly keep this light beam on this dot, so it was a constant coordination test. People under the influence of marijuana did better than people who weren't. So it is actually not an impairing substance in many instances, but a performance-enhancing substance.
The same way it increases creativity. Why a lot of people who do creative pursuits want to do it a little high.
But only in that factor of where people perform better, more coordinated, better drivers when they're under the influence of marijuana is only among experienced cannabis consumers. If you take a novice cannabis consumer, they perform worse. So it's critical in a DUI case to establish that your client is a regular cannabis consumer, because then the studies kick in and say, well, then he actually drives better than a person would drive.
I know that when I introduce people to cannabis who are new, especially the older guys there's a lot of guys, the boomers, who are all trying this stuff out for the first time. I always tell them, take a hit and wait 15 minutes. Yeah. To see how that, and you want to ease into it. Yeah. If you're not feeling anything, take another hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Start to find out where you are. Like I know after doing it since I was 14.
Yeah.
I know exactly where I'm
right,
going to get.
right.
I'm going to go away. You do too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with a guy I've known for many years, who lives in San Francisco, but not part of the cannabis culture out there. But in the past he had, he decided to go get some edibles, and his one buddy was telling him, "Yeah, I'd start off with like 30." I'm like, "Dude, just take 10 milligrams.
Right.
Wait for a half an hour, 45 minutes. If you feel like I don't even know, then okay, make a decision that maybe you take 10 milligrams more. But what do you got to lose? I mean, start with 10.
What
and
I've been
see how it
using
feels.
lately, have you been seeing the
Milligrams,
the dissolved concentrates? They come in 5 milligrams at a time. You put it in the water.
Yes. So
That's what I've been
I've
suggesting.
heard of that. I haven't actually seen it, but yeah.
Select has it, and a few other brands too. I've been using this now, suggesting it to people. I'm not a practitioner, but I've been suggesting get a bottle of this now that it's legal. It's 5 milligrams at a time. You put it in water. It has a little flavor. Pick a flavor you like.
Right.
Drink it down, and it's much. Edibles. The problem with most edibles is that people absorb at different rates.
Yep.
Like I'm a slow absorber. It takes me about.
Depends on how much food you have in your stomach, too.
Right. I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
But with these drinks, it's about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So you drink 5 milligrams. Like we have a partner in this endeavor who had never tried it before. And I said, okay, I had him as a guest in my home, and I said, here, let's start with 5 milligrams, take a drink. And he was pretty loopy at 5.
Really?
I said, let's go 5 more. And he said, oh, I feel like my brain's being massaged. I said, stop. That's it, right there. Right there.
Yeah. So that's that's a novice user.
Right.
Very different type of reaction from someone who's a daily, a consumer. So, and that really makes a big difference. I know we've been talking a lot about DUI law. Obviously, I represent people in all kinds of stuff, large cultivation operations, transportation of hundreds of pounds, over the interstate, delivery companies and sales, small sales, large sales. All of that is still, and that's the part. So I never really did a lot with just simple possession of marijuana because they're relatively simple, and there's a lot of attorneys that can easily handle a case like that. They used to do like task all the time in Maricopa County, right? I'm not going to charge someone money. I was like, look, you can do this yourself, or just have a public defender. You don't got to pay me money. So my clients have always been the bigger, higher level felony charges. Where people are looking at multiple years in prison.
The guys I spent a lot of time with.
Yeah. I mean, on a first offense, if you get caught in possession of say 2.5 pounds of marijuana, and they're alleging it's for sale, if they're able to prove that at trial, you go away for a presumptive term of 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison. Anything over anything over 4 pounds, that would be. Anything over 2 pounds, you're looking at 3.5 years presumptive sentence in prison. So it's just with that small amount, it really goes. And this is an important thing we should talk about relating to now, in addition to being able to possess these substances, marijuana and the concentrates and the paraphernalia under the new law. You can also grow up to 6 plants. And one of the issues, and there are several areas of ambiguity or misunderstanding in the new law that really, at some point, we should just go over them one at a time. And I mean, I do a seminar about this.
So let's set a date. When you want to do, people can only absorb so much.
Right.
And I think we've covered the small possessor a lot. Let's get into the more complicated ones in our next session. We'll set it up. We'll do it soon.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'll tell you what. I'll send you I do a seminar for usually once a month for free, just to whoever's interested. Here's what the law is. Don't listen to the internet. Don't go and try to talk to your buddy about it, because you're going to run afoul of the law, and it's going to be. And I've seen that happen. It's very tragic.
How long does the seminar last? I'm just curious.
That seminar can go anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it covers everything under the new law. I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint. You can look through it, and you can say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that.
That'll be great. That'll be great. And I'm going to put the link, as I said earlier, I'm going to put the link to Tom and his practice below. We'll get the link to the what did you? Oh God! Wait! Don't tell me the glove. No, was the glove
box lawyer?
Glove box. I always called it the compartment.
Me too, but someone started calling it glove box, and I kind of liked it. So glove box.
It sounds better than glove compartment.
Yeah.
Too many syllables. The glove box lawyer. We'll put the link below for that as well. Also, what was the name of the doctor in California? I'd like to track him down for a little discussion.
David Bearman. You can look. You can Google Dr. David Bearman. He'd love to do it. I'll tell you, I kind of introduced him to Arizona. He already had a big name in California and so forth.
I'm going to call him up today. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to track him down.
The AACJ, which is the criminal defense bar here in Arizona, I referred him to a case down in Pima County. This was a case where Sandra Day O'Connor's, after she had passed, her younger sister was killed in a car accident. The driver of that other car happened to have some trace amounts of THC, and of course they try to make it into this, this impaired thing from T. I said, you got to get Dave Behrman. They got him in there. He's a medical doctor. Not guilty. Imagine what that took for, Arizona's favorite daughter's younger sister, right?
Right, get it.
And he really is quite amazing. And I did a murder trial.
Just out of curiosity, because I'm from Tucson originally, who was the criminal attorney in Tucson representing her?
Do you remember? I was talking to the AACJ. Dave Eichner and Sarah Mayhew is who I was talking to. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure who the trial attorney was down there who did that case.
I know most of the criminal bar attorneys down there. I was just curious. I'm just curious.
Sure.
That was just neither here nor there.
I mean, my part was sending him Behrman because I knew, you get him and that's the best.
Tech Mastery, we're going to get him on as a guest as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Got it.
Groovy.
Cool.
Okay, we're going to wrap this one up today. I mean, guys, obviously, we could go on and on and on and on. And the next time we have Tom on, we're going to do it as a live stream, okay? And as the live stream, people will be able to write us. We're going live next week. They'll be able to give us questions as we're doing it, and we'll just go on as long as it goes.
I love that.
We'll kind of do your seminar but even in longer form.
Well, I'll warn you though, if that's the approach we go, we'll be here all day because people there's no shortage of questions.
And here's the deal: on a live stream, people can sign on and sign off, right? So we'll go as long as it because look, guys, as your silver stoner and the guy trying to lead you in this effort, I don't want you going to prison for some stupid fucking thing. And I was in prison with a lot of guys who really were not bad guys. I mean, I know there's a caricature, right? Most of them are just fatherless kids who didn't, got involved. And I mean, redeemable people. If we had a system that was remotely about redemption as opposed to fucking up someone's life forever for the prison industrial complex, a term I love, these kids wouldn't be lost. I mean, we are so off base. Right. And I can tell you and I are on the same page. And we'll be, and I know all of you are. So we'll be back and talk to Tom again. And hey, thanks a million for being here.
Right, great to be here.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.
Thanks.
You're listening to The Silver Stoner Show.